So let me start, Ehud, by asking you what happened overnight in terms of the rockets. Are they using heavier rockets with longer distance and payloads? What's the result of what took place last night between Hamas and the Israelis from a strategic and practical point of view?
Well, the escalation is still there. We have absorbed since 6 p.m. Israel time yesterday about 260 rockets. 90% were intercepted by the Iron Dome or fell in open fields. The Iron Dome doesn't intercept those that are not going to hit populated areas. 2 buildings in the city of Ashkelon, which was the main target overnight, were hit. No casualties, few lightly injured Israelis. They are not using new weapons, no new rockets. So far, they are refraining from trying to lob rockets into the Tel Aviv area, as an indication to the Israelis that they are not so quick escalating this conflict further. From the point of view of Hamas, the main problem is, one, the Iron Dome is a very good response to the rockets. And number 2, over the past 3 years, they have lost the attack tunnels, which was the other major weapon that they have prepared for a confrontation with Israel. What the Israeli Air Force did overnight was hitting 130 targets all over the Gaza Strip. Few officers and activists of the military wing of Hamas were eliminated. One of them, a battalion commander in the refugee camp of Sajaiye. But the main attacks were against installations of Hamas where they are producing missiles, storing rockets, their naval commando unit, etc. The Air Force keeps going. The most worrying aspect of this escalation, from my point of view, is that as we were talking throughout the past few months about the real possibility that an Arab party or more will become part of the next Israeli coalition government, we have seen overnight dozens and dozens cases of violent rioting in Arab villages and mixed cities like Haifa, Lod, Ramle, from the Bedouins in the south up to the Upper Galilee, including attempts to besiege police stations, setting up roadblocks on the roads. In one case, they took a lady out of her car and burned it down. Lots of Molotov cocktails, lots of rioting. And in the town of Lod, a group of Jews felt so threatened that they have fired first in the air, but then shot one Arab dead. This is the general picture at the moment.
Can you confirm that a synagogue in Ramle was ransacked this morning?
As I have it at this point, but I'm mainly concentrating on the Hamas side, as I have it, it was a Talmud Torah, which was ransacked, set on fire, etc. We've seen overnight many hundreds of Arab youths. I'm sure many of them work together with Jews in all sorts of workplaces around the country, taking out to the streets and the roads. There were similar attempts, by the way, in the West Bank, because there you have a very funny situation. On the one hand, the Fatah movement, Mr. Abbas's movement, is calling on people to go out, take to the streets and demonstrate. On the other hand, the security agencies of the Palestinian Authority is trying to prevent the demonstrators from reaching the Israeli military points at the outskirts. So far it worked.
And as far as the hope for a new coalition government, is that dead now because of these unexpected violent events?
We don't have a death certificate for what they call the change coalition to replace Bibi and the Likud, but I feel at this point it's highly unlikely that Mr. Bennett, Lapid, Lieberman will form a government which is dependent on the votes of the Unified Arab List, that's the Israeli Islamist movement. And the leader of this list, Mr. Mansour Abbas, has suspended his negotiations with Bennett and Lapid. This is not the atmosphere for Bennett, Lapid, and their partners to combine with an Arab list. And this is not the time for any of the 4 different Arab lists to join a government that is sending the Air Force to bomb Hamas in Gaza.
Right. So the last question, issue, has to do with the broader reaction around the world. I'm not talking about so much in the West. We saw a very strident statement from Saudi Arabia's foreign ministry, putting the blame on Israel for everything that's happened. And the other more disturbing thing, perhaps for those of us who are in the States, one of the leaders of Black Lives Matter took the video that shows the fire that they started next to Al-Aqsa as the backdrop to the Yom Yerushalayim festivities below next to the Kotel, and used that for their well-known intersectionality, meaning connecting dots that don't exist, in order to really slander not just the state of Israel, the Jewish people, Judaism, Zionism. That is going to play out I think, very powerfully, very negatively here domestically in the U.S. And I imagine that people will be pointing to other reactions that will impact also on Jews in the diaspora.
Yeah, Abe, my sense is that Arab government's reactions so far was what you would expect, but not beyond. I find the Saudi communique sort of relatively restrained. But here again, we are faced with the bankruptcy of the Israeli Foreign Ministry, the Israeli information agencies, etc. And I'll take, for example, the incident you mentioned on the courtyard of Al-Aqsa, setting a cypress tree on fire. That was intentional. They threw Molotov cocktails at the tree in order to try and scare thousands of Jews who were praying at the Kotel, trying to scare them away. At that moment, we sat in the studio and we said, on television studio, and we said, Israel has now immediately to spread the word of what has happened, because otherwise the Palestinians will claim that this is the Israeli police, which of course they did. And they claim now that it was grenades, stun grenades thrown by the police, and the Israelis, as usual, too late in responding, not realizing what the cost could be. This confrontation is taking place at a time in which Israel is not in a bad shape, in a good shape. Israel has broadcasted to Hamas and all around that we were confused, that we were zigzagging, for example, on the Flags March in Jerusalem, changing the instructions every time, and this sense that the government and the whole political system is confused and embarrassed, spilled over, and this is the reason why, for example, Hamas takes liberties, as they did, and are abused within Israel, are doing something that they have never done during previous skirmishes with Hamas.
Right. I think social media is definitely a contributing factor, not only with Arab Israeli youth, but globally. Ehud, thank you again for your direct and honest answers. And I hope we'll have a few boring days ahead of us, but that's not going to happen so quickly. Thanks again. Appreciate your time. God bless. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye.